Thought we should take an opportunity here on TikTok, on YouTube, on our podcasts, talk a little bit about voting. I've gotten a bunch of questions about voting, and you can reach me here at Rick Wagner, that's one word, RICKWAGNER, at mail.com. But many people are really concerned about voting, voter fraud, what's happened in the last election, what's going to happen in this next election, and really what's going to happen in 2024. And clearly, there were serious problems with the voting. I don't care whether they take you off Twitter or this channel or some other channel. The election was terribly flawed in so many different ways, and there's plenty of evidence of it. Now, to make a court listen, you have to be able to have some evidence to show that what happened was enough to change the results of the election. That's really quite difficult to do. And we just didn't have it in some of these instances. And in other instances, the judges were cowards. They refused to hear the cases. Depends on where you were at. Pennsylvania Supreme Court waited until after the election and after everything was done to come in and say, oh, yeah, the legislature is the only one that really make those changes. The Secretary of State should have made those changes to the voting laws. That's really where all this stuff started, is changing the voting laws, make these things easier to do. For anybody who believes voting is important, to constantly make it less and less important, to act like you don't care about it at all, what kind of message does that send? I would say that if you ask me, and people have, what is the number one thing that we should stop in order to help with this voting fraud thing that's going on? And there is voter fraud going on when we have elections, and it seems much worse. And I watched Dinesh D'Souza's movie, 2000 Mules. I would recommend it to all you folks out there to watch. Make up your own mind about it. It was a very clever technical ploy that they did there, I have to say, and it's very convincing. But beyond that, many people would say, well, the thing we have to do is get rid of mail-in voting. Yeah, universal mail-in voting is ridiculous. There are really three things that have ruined the system of voting and made it so difficult both to track and stop voter fraud. And that is not purging the ballots of people who haven't voted for 2 presidential elections, for instance, and making them come in and register again if they exist, they're still on the planet, if they still are living in the state, if they're still living at all. That's been done for a long time. State after state won't do it. We send more and more votes through the mail to places who knows where they're going. Now, some states, like where I'm at in Colorado, say, oh, we have that figured out, because if it comes back as undeliverable, we take them off the voting roll and they have to come in and register. Really? How many things come back undeliverable these days? I mean, not many. I talk to people all the time that see ballots laying all over the place at like apartment houses and things of that nature. That's a ridiculous assumption. And anybody that says that is just making a very feeble pass at saying they have some kind of security over the voting. It's not secure. But what has to be done first off is something that I can't believe we ever started to begin with: voter harvesting. In California, you can collect as many votes from people, rather their ballots, as you want, and just bring them in. That's right. You can bring them in. In some states, where I'm at in Colorado now, because we have legislatures that have the IQ of a clam and apparently like to see elections that don't results that people trust, you can bring 10 in, right? Why? If you're voting for everything by mail, what's the problem? I actually had somebody say, well, some people can't afford a stamp. Really? I would be willing in my state to completely do away with voter harvesting and we can put a stamped self-addressed envelope in there with it, because it only gets used and you only get charged if somebody uses the envelope. So I'd be willing to do that if that's your problem. And of course, it's not the problem. It's just a ruse. Voter harvesting is a terrible, terrible thing. It shows you don't care about voting. It shows that you would prefer to go out and let unknown people gather them. And if you've seen 2000 Mules, you got to say something about watching people pull up to ballot boxes that are stuck literally in the middle of nowhere in cities and so forth and start shoving ballots into them is a little weird. I mean, wouldn't even make people work for it. I mean, wouldn't Tammany Hall in the 1850s and so forth have loved all this stuff up until, well, Tammany Hall and then all the way back to the 1850s, when there was all this voter fraud in like New York and stuff. At least people had to work for it. They had to put a disguise on, maybe put a hat, a fake beard, something, go vote for somebody else, as somebody else, someplace else. We don't make them do that anymore. Now we just bring in a load of ballots and they get to start stuffing them in the boxes. That's a ridiculous thing. We need to get rid of voter harvesting. And if you're in a state that has it, you need to stop it. And if you have to go to your legislature, it's up to you, of course. I can tell you what to do. If it were I would go to my legislature and ask them to stop it. If they won't do it, I would find out what the process is to get that on the ballot and let the people vote on it. Because anybody that thinks about this for a minute isn't going to believe that that is the way to handle something as important as the ballot. There's a lot of other ways to do it. We did it for a long time, no problems. This was a solution to a problem that did not exist. But it's also a solution to a problem that exists only on one side. The people that want things to go their way, no matter how people feel at the time. It helps you sometimes get the votes you want. I'm not saying what happened. I'm just saying it makes it way too easy. It's got to stop. Talk to you soon.